Hello everyone, welcome to Study Buzz. This is Nikita and I'm thrilled to share this new video with you to make your verbal section much easier. But before we delve into today's content, make sure to hit that subscribe button and follow us on our Instagram channel and press bell icon to receive important videos updates. You can also follow us on our Instagram channel, which is studybuzz_education, and the other handles as is mentioned on your screen. You can also download our app, which is also given on the screen. Now let's move on to the video. The topic for today is the second kind of parajumbles known as TITA parajumbles. TITA literally can refer to type in the answer. Essentially, what we mean here is that you will not be given the MCQ kind of question where you have options to choose your answer from, but what will happen is you will be able to get a question for the parajumble as you usually get 4 or 5 sentences which are jumbled up in the order, and you have to make a coherent paragraph out of it, and then instead of options you will get something like a calculator looking thing here, right? In it there will be these numbers which are mentioned, be it ABCD or be it 1 2 3 4 whatever, and then there will be this little screen here, right? So once you know your answer, you will click on these numbers and input your sequence in this one, and that will be counted as your answer. This is what we mean by TITA based questions. TITA based questions do not have answers, and you will have to type in your own answer for that. Hence they are the subjective kind of questions. Now this makes us another interesting thing. Subjective kind of questions for parajumbles only occur in CAT. Till now CAT is the only one which has TITA based parajumbles. But nice thing in CAT is that for subjective questions you do not have negative marking. There is no negative marking. Hence for these questions you can answer them with peace of mind. You will not be getting any negative marking for these kind of questions. However, because there it is a nice thing, right, that there is no negative marking, so you can attempt them however you like. But again there is a problem here. If there is MCQ based parajumbles, then you only have to look for 4 different possibilities, but that increases substantially in TITA based questions. There is a very high chance of getting these questions wrong. The accuracy goes down because you cannot eliminate the options, because there is no options that that exists. Also the accuracy goes down because you cannot use elimination here, as well as there are multiple different possibilities that exists for the answers, a lot more as compared to the MCQ based one. Hence this becomes a little more difficult to solve, although it is not carrying negative marking, but still it becomes a little more difficult and time consuming for the same reason. However, they are extremely important because you do get at least 2 questions in the examination for this. So they form a very nice chunk of your verbal section, right? Hence they are important. So let's dive into it. Understanding how to approach these kind of questions. Now you must remember that although they are fundamentally different formats of questions, the MCQ based parajumbles and TITA based parajumbles, they are different from each other in the way that they do not have options. They follow different kind of formats for question making. However, the ways of solving the question remains the same. The base concept for these questions remain the same, right? Now how do we approach these questions? First and foremost, we must read and try to find the main idea. we must read the sentences, try to find the main idea, try to find the main message, the main subject, the main idea of the entire central theme of the entire para which is given to you in the broken jumbled up mess, right? Until and unless you cannot figure out the main idea, you will not be able to figure out in which direction to move, right? Main idea, understanding the main idea or the main subject which is being talked about, you will be able to give you the starting point of linking the sentences together. You will be able to try and link the sentences together and work through the base of the information, right? So it is pertinent to find the main idea here. Then comes the mandatory pairs. You should be able to form mandatory pairs in the sentences. Forming mandatory pairs means that if there are 4 different sentences which are provided to you, A, B, C, D, in the jumbled mess, and you're able to figure out that, say, C and B, these 2 sentences in this order are continuation of one another. B is the continuation of C. The information which is provided in the C is continued directly in the sentence B. So in this case, this becomes the mandatory pair. And if we can find mandatory pairs in the question, we will be able to rearrange them, or if we can find even a single one, we will be able to build upon that, right? Now obviously we will be using the various different approaches, the keyword approach and structural approach that we studied in the last class. Keyword where we depend upon the grammatical rules, and the structural where we depend upon the entire thing in the entire logical continuation, in the entire logical application of the paragraph, right? So we will be using them for finding the main ideas, for finding the main mandatory pairs, those kind of things. Obviously we will be able to use them to approach the same question, approach these questions in the same way that we did with the MCQ based parajumbles, right? However, we need to pay much more attention here because we cannot use elimination because there are no options to eliminate, right? Then the thing which becomes even more important here is the only rule that exists in these questions. In parajumbles, everything depends upon question to question and should be adapted accordingly. However, there is one rule which is going to be applied everywhere in each and every question, which is general to specific, as in the flow of information has to be from general to specific. Firstly, the most introductory sentence, the most general sentence, the sentence which provides the base information shall come, and then the specifics will come. Why? Because 90% of the times the things that you get here are going to follow the formal logic of deductive logic, right? The formal logic application will be deductive logic, because that is what happens usually, most commonly in the literary world, right? So they do not want to make it a very difficult thing to not be able to solve, right? Hence usually the most common kind is used. So it follows deductive logic. Deductive logic works on general to specific approach. First you will give the general theory, and then you will give the evidences or the examples where that general theory can be proven or can be extrapolated, so, or expounded. So we move from general to specific in the direction or the flow of sentences or the flow of information, right? So how do we use it? We use it everywhere, right? If these ABCD 4 sentences are to be rearranged in the coherent manner, then we will try and find out which is the most general sentence, which is the sentence which provides the most general information. By this, what do we mean? It means that it has to be the sentence which does not require any other information, prior information from the other sentences for us to understand that one, right? So for example, D will be the general sentence, most general sentence, if I can understand D, comprehend D without needing prior knowledge of any of these remaining sentences. In that case, D becomes the introductory and the most general one, so it becomes my opening statement. I hope I'm clear to that. And then we will look for the second most general one, right? And then so on and so forth, right? So this is how we can use this rule commonly. Then in the mandatory pairs as well, how do we know that C will come before B and not BC? How do we know this? We again will know this by general to specific rule. We will compare and find out which one is the most general one out of C and B, and then put that one first. Again, if I can figure out that there is this one mandatory pair and then there is this one another mandatory pair in these two sentences, how do I know which one to put first? Again, this will follow the general to specific rule. I'll find out of these two mandatory pairs, I will find out which one is the most general one, which one gives the most general information, put that one first, most basic one first, and then the next one, right? This is how I can generally approach these kind of questions. Now let's look through a previous year question so that we can apply whatever we have learned and be able to understand these kind of questions more easily. This is a previous year question of CAT 23. I'll ask you to pause this video here and try to solve it. So let's look through the question. I hope you have tried your answers. So let's look through and see which one of us got the correct ones. Now let's read it. So this one says, first one says, algorithms hosted on the internet are accessed by many, so biases in the AI models have resulted in much larger impact. See, it says so biases have resulted in much larger impact. Now we are using a comparative degree here, much larger, adversely affecting far larger groups. Again, a comparative degree. So if we are comparing something, and this is very clearly the one which is secondary, right? So there has to be something which can come here to complete the comparison pair. So for that we can figure out that this is most likely not the opening statement, right? Because another one is to be needed to put it here to make it known where or for what we are comparing it to be much larger impact. Let's look through. Second says, though algorithmic bias. See, again, remember from the last class we talked about these kind of words. They usually do not form the opening statements, so we can keep it aside still. Again, it says, though algorithmic bias is the popular term. See, even though it could not be the mandatory pair, even though it could not be the opening statement, but here we talked about algorithms and the biases on the algorithms, biases in AI models, right? And here we are talking about algorithmic bias. So we are very clearly talking about the same kind of thing, are we not? Right? Still, let's look through it. Is the popular term foundation of such bias is not in algorithms. See, we are talking about the same information. So remember the structural approach. Same information has to be put together. But in the data, algorithms are not biased. Again, we're talking about algorithms being biased and not biased. Data is as algorithms merely reflect persistent patterns that are present in the training data. Here we introduce that there exists biases in the AI model and they have much larger impact. Here we explained that although it is called algorithmic bias, but they do not actually exist in algorithms but in the data. So we are giving further explanation for the points which are mentioned in this statement, right? And also this one starts with though, which kindly correlates with the ideas which are presented here, right? They are the contrasting ideas. Although we can use it in the same way we use although. So they are the contrasting ideas which are presented here, which makes them what? Continuation of each other. So clearly 1 and 2 becomes a mandatory pair. Let's keep it aside for now. Let's look through this. Despite their widespread impact, despite what? Having widespread. So what is this there that we are talking about? Who is this there? We have no idea yet, because we need an information before we can understand this one. So this can again not be the opening statement. It is relatively easier to fix AI biases. Again, we are moving on with AI biases than human generated biases. So see, we are talking about fixing something, right? If we look through the general to specific thing, first we will have to know what is the problem, then we will be able to understand what is the problem, how it impacts, and then we will be able to fix the problem. This is the general thing, how it works, right? This is how generally this thing works. So here we know the name of something, here we know about what actually happens, and here we're talking about fixing what actually happened. So these are clearly following the exact same pattern, right? Let's still look through it. Second one, sorry, let's look through it. As it is simpler to identify the former, to try to make people unlearn behaviors learned over the generations, right? So see, second sentence, it talked about that the foundation of the bias is not in algorithms but in the data, right? Then third one again continued it and stated that AI biases are easier to fix when compared to human generated biases, right? So it talked about biases which was introduced here, algorithmic biases, and how they could be fixed, right? So 2 and 3, they are very strongly linked together. So we can have 2 and 3 as mandatory pair as well, right? So by these two, what can I say? I can say that 1, 2, 3, these are going to come together, right? Now let's look at 4. The impact of biased decisions made by human is localized and geographically confined. But with the advent of AI, see, it says advent of AI. So chronology basis tell us that everywhere in the last 3 sentences we were talking about the impacts of AI. Here we are talking about advent of AI, so which is obviously going to come earlier, right? The impact of such decisions is spread over a much wider scale. Now this also gives us the first part that was needed to compare here, right? So we can say that 4 and 1 are very closely linked. Why? Because 4 states that AI, the advent of AI happened, right? The AI came up, and the impact that the biased decisions had, right? It spread over a much wider scale, and this was further expounded on in this part of the sentence, like first sentence, which means what? That 4 and 1 are talking about the same thing. Also, to understand 4, we do not need any other information. No noun pronoun thing is happening. Nothing is required for us to have, preconceived information or preconceived notions. So 4 becomes the most general one, which means it is also the opening statement. So if 4 and 1 are mandatory pair, I can keep 4 here, which means my answer becomes what? 4, 1, 2, 3. I hope this is clear to you on how to approach these questions. Hope this was good. All the best. See you next time.